Was there any sort of a scene that George wanted to do that he couldn't do back then? Because I've read in interviews that he couldn't, make the originals as maybe flashy as the prequels because the technology wasn't around. But did you know of anything that he wanted to do that just had to be taken out of the script or taken out of the movie because it just couldn't be done at the time?
Well, famously, there were shots in the original Star Wars that the studio would not let him do for cost reasons, and they control everything. And I've said this before. I was in on the restoration of the 3 Star Wars films. Okay, this is how it happened. We're sitting in C Theater, which is the building next to my building at ILM. And this is a beautiful Art Deco theater that George and his wife designed, because it also had a bunch of editing rooms there. And if you've ever been into a studio editing room, they're like a basement and they're horrible. And when he designed his, they have patios, they have beautiful furniture, thick carpets, wonderful. The theater was like that too, just soundproof. The theater floated inside the building. It didn't touch anything because it was originally a sound mixing theater for, Skywalker sound. Okay, so George brings his personal print of Star Wars down and he runs it for us. Now this, when I say his personal print, this is one of the only prints ever off of the original negative. And he had a copy of it, brought it down, ran it for us, and told us of the changes that he wanted to make. And the idea was that there were some shots, like the famous Jabba the Hutt shot,
right,
that was later done in CG, that just couldn't be done. The technology was not there. He did the best he could. And but when it came time to cut into the original negative, my friend Tom Christopher was the guy who did it. He was the guy who George saw every Friday. No one saw George every Friday. Tom did. And he would update him on where we are with the restoration of Star Wars. And so when they got all done, Tom has the negative laid out there, and he's starting to cut the new shots in, the replacement shots. George hated some of the way the wipes were done. And when they reprinted them, there was a lot of dirt in them. All that needed to be redone. And at one point, Tom says, before we do this, we could just run off a dupe negative in IP, and you'd always have the original version. Right. And George said, basically, stop right there. You don't understand. This, what I'm doing now, this is the original version. This is what I want to do, and they would not let me do. And now I have the money to do it. Okay. Now,
that's so badass.
Some people are very unhappy with changes that were made.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to point out, I don't have a dog in this fight, but I'd just like to point out that every artist, novelist, painter, every kind of artist is constantly adding and making changes to their work. Scott Fitzgerald is the one I can think of off the top of my head. And I liken it to this. Let's say you're some kind of big shot financier in the 1950s, and you're in a penthouse in New York, and you have a Picasso, a really nice one. And you have Picasso over to dinner because he's still alive. And he looks at the painting, he says, Bob, I always wanted to add a little green to that, but I never could afford it. Would you mind? What are you going to say to the guy? No.
Absolutely. No.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting.